I wanted to mention a couple of guests we'll be speaking with tomorrow. Well, of course, between 9 and 9:30, likely going to be joined by Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn. And Friday mornings in that time slot, we talk about firearms and issues related to firearms ownership. There's a great letter on the op-ed pages today of the paper up in Nampa, which is called the Press Tribune. You can go look it up online, but it comes from looks Greg Pruitt, uh, and he is one of the leading, I guess, put it this way, most outspoken advocates for Second Amendment rights in Idaho. And he's talking today about the Castle Doctrine, and people believe we have that in Idaho, but technically we don't. Worthwhile, read that if you get a chance today. I saw it this morning as I was getting ready to go on air and check that out. But there's a lot of issues still that we have to talk about when it comes to firearms and firearms ownership, and I think that Forrest really drills down on these things when he's in studio with us. Also, wanted to point out tomorrow morning we had a caller probably 3 or 4 months ago who mentioned that he thought the city of Twin Falls was just growing too rapidly for his tastes, and he wanted some sort of controls over that, and thought that we needed to maybe back off on this. We've got a guest coming in studio tomorrow who's going to be speaking with us about the city's comprehensive plan. In other words, what direction are we going to go with all of this growth, and where is it going to happen, and do we need to have restrictions or no restrictions? And they're looking for your input. That's tomorrow morning. So if you're one of those people who has some concerns, this is your opportunity to get some questions answered during the course of our program tomorrow. I also wanted to mention, if you're listening today, I thank you. If you're struggling to listen, you likely need to get in touch with Mount Harrison Audiology and Dr. Christine Pickup in Rupert. Did you know that your hearing health and your brain health are connected? At Mount Harrison Audiology, they've been studying the research on cognitive health and hearing. The most recent findings are proving that when hearing loss is addressed with hearing aids, the effects of cognitive decline are greatly diminished. Hearing is critical for communication, for your connection to others, and for overall well being. Now is the time, she reminds you, to improve the hearing issues that you may have. You can call Mount Harrison Audiology for an appointment. The number is 312-0957. Did any of you hear? I mean, it's been buried a little bit because between the terrorist attacks over the weekend and then what's going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, national news media really is only capable of covering one fire at a time. And if they're not covering a fire, they're basically trying to make Donald Trump look bad in hopes that you'll vote for their girl, Hillary. So it may well have been overlooked yesterday, but I found two stories on this issue. Actually, three, because one of them might be related to this. Washington Times. Mass immigration costs government $296 billion a year and depresses wages. That's nearly $300 billion for you liberals who might be listening today. Reporter Stephen Dinan says immigration drains the government, sapping as much as $296 billion a year from federal, state, and local taxpayers, while depressing wages, at least in the short run, according to an authoritative study released Wednesday by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. The data show that immigrants take more in benefits than they pay in taxes. Gosh, now what a shock that is. Although immigrants do boost the size of the economy, the gains are heavily skewed toward the immigrants themselves and to wealthy investors, not to native-born workers who end up competing with the new arrivals. Have we heard that one before? But Bill, we have to be compassionate. How about you be compassionate to your own people for a change? Here's another one. This is related to it. This is from the Daily Signal. Headline is, every immigrant without high school degree will cost taxpayers $640,000. Those of you who plan to send children to college, and if you've got 3 or 4 kids and you can't afford to do it, well, this is why. On average, a non-elderly adult immigrant without a high school diploma entering the U.S. will create a net fiscal cost in both current generation and second generation. The average net present value of the fiscal cost of such an immigrant is estimated at $231,000, a cost that must be paid by you. The concept, though, of net present value is complex. It places a much lower value on future expenditures than on current. One way to grasp this is that it represents the total amount of money that government would have to raise today and put in a bank account earning interest at 3% above the inflation rate in order to cover future costs. A rough estimate of the future net outlays to be paid by taxpayers for immigrants without a high school diploma appears to be around $640,000 per immigrant over 75 years. The average fiscal loss is around $7,551 per year in constant 2012 dollars. This means government would have to immediately raise taxes by nearly $1 trillion. And remember, a trillion is 1,000 billion. A billion is 1,000 million. Government would have to immediately raise taxes by nearly $1 trillion and put that sum into a bank account earning 3% plus inflation per year to cover the future fiscal losses that will be generated by those immigrants. Now, think about this for a moment. You're saying to yourself, yeah, but Bill, this is only about immigrants without high school diplomas. Next time you see some of the migrant laborers or you run into them shopping at Winco or Costco or Walmart, do a little, I think you can, I hate to say we're profiling, but gee willikers, I'm guessing a lot of those people have no degrees whatsoever. And finally, this from the Daily Signal. Up to 15% of non-citizens in America are voting. The Obama White House of course, opposes verifying these people before they vote. But the writer says a 2014 study by Old Dominion University, which is filled with liberals, found that 6.5% of all non-citizens voted in 2008. And the study concludes that likely put Minnesota Senator Al Franken, a Democrat, over the top in his race in his state that year. I'm not surprised. We've got more on the way. It's 9:30. It's 53. Quick moving show today, just half an hour to go before we wrap it up. Telephone number if you'd like to reach us, 736-0300, 736-0300. Thank you for joining me, Bill Colley, on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number 736-0300, 736-0300. Going to look at a high today, temperature probably not much higher than right now. It's 53 at 9:34, and that means if you have not yet tested out that furnace, you may be doing it in the next couple of days. And if it has a few issues, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They're 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number is 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning. The owner and CEO of Shabani here is on record is that Muslims that come into this country do not have to assimilate. Now that says a lot. And he's got a big operation here in Twin Falls area. The people need to be aware of that situation.
Did you know that the London mayor who's been visiting in this country and he's campaigning for his pal Hillary Clinton, now his name is Khan. He's a Muslim too, but he's over here from England. He said the same thing a couple of days ago and said that they should preserve their own cultures, which, of course, they come here and they immediately think everybody else who lives here already should drop what we have and adopt what they've got.
Well, and also it's against the law to bring in Sharia law, anything that was available way back in the 50s, early 50s, I think 52, that anyone, it was basically treason to bring in any other government than constitutional law. And these people, obviously, their culture is Sharia law, which is totally anti-constitutional, as you well know. There's no merging of those things. They're trying to merge their theology with Christianity, and of course that's not going to work either. But talking about Hillary, of course, and Obama, they plan to bring in how many more refugees? There's a bill right now to bring in, with a new budget and so forth, raise the H-2B visas from 66,000. Now these are more highly educated people, and they want to raise it to 264,000.
Here's a couple of things to keep in mind. The majority of Democrats are opposed even to, for instance, late-term abortions, and about half of Democrats now are even unsure about abortion altogether. And yet the party continues to push, abortion on demand, no matter how long or how far along the woman happens to be in her pregnancy. Number two, I mentioned earlier, J.D. Vance, writing today in the New York Times, says 40% of Democrats, not just Republicans, 40% of Democrats would like a ban on Muslim immigration into the United States. And yet, why does she continue to show such strong numbers in her own party if she is running so counter to the views and the attitudes of her fellow Democrats?
Well, here's the whole deal. It's all about all the freebies that are out there. The people running around. There's no rioting this morning. I think they're all asleep. They don't have to get up and go to work. They're on welfare, and so they can riot all night and sleep till whenever. And that's the problem we have is we don't allow. As long as people don't have to work for their subsistence, they become totally dependent on the government. And when you got 11 states, Bill, that have more people on welfare than actual workers, I mean, this is a major problem, and Hillary already has those states already in her electoral college vote account. So, folks, we better wake up. Hillary, you realize, was a big Saul Alinsky fan, and he dedicated his book to Rules for Radicals to Lucifer. That kind of tells you what Hillary's all about. And of course, every day there's something more on Trump, and the national news media, the mainstream media, is just basically her campaign.
Yeah, I thank you much for the call, and more so now than ever. In my lifetime, the Democrats have always uh, been working hand in glove with the media, but nothing like we've seen this year. I mean, it was disgusting in 2012 when Candy Crowley purposely, on purpose, turned around the debates in favor of Barack Obama, and of course, if Mitt Romney had been a little quicker on his feet, he would have told her, "Hey," but he didn't. And then you go back to 2008, and of course, the Democrats and their allies in media selected John McCain. Told you he's the guy you got to vote for in the primaries because, well, he's the guy they wanted. He was the most liked Democrats. But then, as soon as they nominated him, the Republicans did. The media turned on him, and we've seen it over and over and over again. And they're trying to pick your candidates again. They're trying to tell you who to vote for in November. And they're trying to tell you don't vote for Donald Trump. Well, it's not apparently working so far. You'd like to think that the American people aren't influenced by these things. However, according to Edward Bernays and some of the early people who developed advertising in this country, unfortunately, caller, I'm going to have to put you on hold, or you're going to have to wait through the break. I just looked at the clock, and I've got a hard break I can't avoid here. Or you can call me back in the next segment of the program. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. You hope that people aren't susceptible. That's my point to these type of these sales pitches. But according to some of the people who did the research in the last century, you are. And you've got to figure out a way to overcome that. 20 minutes now from 10 o'clock, 54. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 538, which is a very reliable political blog that tracks polling numbers and makes predictions about who's going to win presidential elections and some other smaller elections. I'll get to my callers in just a moment. Thank you, and I do thank you for your patience over the last 20 minutes or so. But 538 blog says this morning that predictions of a Hillary Clinton rebound in the polls have been greatly exaggerated, and they have a list today of all of the state polling where she is literally, in some states, her lead has been more than halved, and in many states, Donald Trump has now surged into the lead. 944, it's 53. You're up next. You're on KLIX with Bill Colley.
Bill, I grew up in Detroit, which was once a beautiful city. The last time I was home, there was one Kroger store left, and the cashiers were behind bulletproof glass. The parking lot and the store were surrounded by a high fence and a gate topped with barbed wire, and the gate was closed at night. That store and all the beautiful department stores and grocery stores are gone. And the people that own those properties couldn't get tenants to move back in, so they abandoned the buildings, and now no money is coming in for property taxes. And the city owes all this money for pensions, and the place is a disaster.
It is, and I thank you for the call. Detroit actually has bears now wandering the city, and packs of wild dogs roam and attack people. In Dallas, in South Dallas, they now have something on the order of 9,000 wild dogs roaming the streets. This is because in a lot of these even cities in Texas may be a very conservative state, but in some of the bigger cities, the Democrats have taken control. Donald Trump offering some of his thoughts on this last night at the Fox Town Hall in Cleveland, we should point out, which is also a dump, but he's referencing the fact that one political party has presided over this collapse of these great cities.
The inner cities are, I mean, can you say never, but certainly one of the worst stages ever in the history of the inner city. It's so unsafe where you walk down the street and you get shot or your child gets shot. We're going to really fix the inner cities. We're going to spend a lot of time. The Democrats have run them for 100 years, mostly uninterrupted. I mean, nobody else. They're just uninterrupted. And you see what's happened.
Yeah, a caller just gave us witness. 946, you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Go ahead.
Yeah, two things quick, Bill. On the debate, I don't know, over the last weekend, we noticed that Hillary's eye, or her left eye, was acting funny during when she went to speak, I forget where, Philadelphia, wherever. She couldn't barely get up the stairs. And when she was awoke on the plane after the bomb went off in New York City and New Jersey, she looked like holy hell, they say. I haven't seen that video. But if it's an hour and a half long, is she going to be sitting? And I don't know how she can stand for an hour and a half. This is a crapshoot for her. Obviously I'm not rooting for her, so it would be interesting to see what might happen. Okay. In Charlotte, were you going to say something?
I was going to say they'll just go out and buy her some EpiPens. They can afford them at least, and they'll fill her full of some of that epinephrine so she can stand there. But go ahead.
Well, I don't know what they give her, and what they're doing to keep her propped up. But, eventually this thing is going to crash. Let's hope it happens before the election. God forbid. I just can't even believe it. But whatever. In Charlotte, over the top of the hour on one of the newscasts, it says, all quiet in Charlotte now. And I said, yeah, it's all quiet because they all went to bed.
Yeah.
They get Obama phones, they get food stamps, they get rent assistance. And when you don't have anything to do, and then when you get $90 million from George Soros, 70, 90, whatever, what's a couple million? I don't know how it's distributed, but these useful idiots do it for free anyway because, hell, they don't get any exercise, Bill. Shit, they got to get out and do some work here and there. And so rioting is exercise. I'll hang up. Thanks.
I guess running up and down the street trying to, outrace the tear gas probably does give you a little bit of exercise. Mike Payne, of course, who many of you know from his days in radio here in Twin Falls, sent me this email this morning. He said, here's the problem, or rub, if you will, with Charlotte. The taxpayer has to pick up the tab for the investigations, rebuilding the damage, and other costs. To the black community, they will no longer have the businesses they say they wanted because the people who own the businesses aren't going to rebuild. And he said, that's what we call insanity, right? And it goes right back to the argument about Detroit. Detroit not only had the big riot in 1943, but after the 1967 riot, which was devastating, 40 some odd people killed in that, everyone headed for the suburbs. There was a story I saw last night. I was watching a video, 10 Things You Don't Know About Great Britain. London, England, and we think it's not just an American problem. The reason London has a Muslim mayor now is because just 15 years ago, about 60% of the people who lived in England were native-born Britons, and mostly white because, well, it isn't, to borrow a line from Archie Bunker or paraphrase him, it's a white country. Now, London, England is only about 40% white native-born Briton. What happened? Well, they all flew out to the suburbs or out to the countrysides. They got out of town. And the only thing left now is Londonistan. And parts of London have become ungovernable. You can't go there. I mean, the no-go zones that they made fun of Mitt Romney for bringing up 4 years ago, they exist. I have friends. I have a friend, he actually goes back and visits every couple of years. He grew up on the East End of London. And he tells me it's not a nice place to visit any longer. And native women walking down the street in their normal English dress are harassed and sometimes beaten with canes by the Muslim men. And the crime is just rampant in those parts of those communities. Look, folks, it's not just the United States. We've got to wake up to all of these issues. And all of your liberal friends out there who keep saying, that's not the kind of people we are. Don't give me that we crap. I know what I believe, and I don't believe what you do. And when 40% of your own fellow Democrat travelers also believe me, well, or agree with me, I think you're wrong. People are fed up. When are you going to get that notion through your noggin? Not everybody wants to be a liberal, cross-dressing homosexual, for crying out loud. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm telling you, all of these changes you've made to our culture, a lot of people are just simply PO'd, and they want it to come to an end. And they look around and they see what's going on in this country where the cities are burning and the Democrat politicians are cheering it on. Stephanie Rawlings Blake in Baltimore, she said, yeah, let them go do it for a while. Let them get it out of their system. Millions of dollars in damage followed. And then she ends up, because Wasserman Schultz ends up quitting the Democrat National Committee in that scandal, Stephanie Rawlings Blake ends up chairing the convention for them. This is the type of people who think that they know best for all of us around the country. Am I missing something here? I mean, did we all do a Rip Van Winkle and fall asleep and wake up or are we on a different planet? Did we somehow get picked up in the middle of the night and get transported to some other galaxy where the bizarro, the universe is in effect? 9:52, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This whole situation in Charlotte, I mentioned my former boss a bit earlier, who lives there, and I had put a video up this morning, one of my own videos about the situation there. And I just noticed he just clicked on like. He's got to drive through that town. He's actually doing some of the Uber driving in Charlotte. Well, you don't know who you're going to pick up anymore on one of these riotous nights, do you? You better just stay home, whether it costs you the Uber job or not. That's the other part of this. The people right now immediately impacted by this who can't go to work today, and a lot of them won't get paid because their business has been burned down. And, well, those awful business owners not paying their workers. Well, if the business owner just lost his shirt, how the heck can he pay the workers? Yes, but they're evil capitalists. Some guy who owns your little corner grocery store, which is about all you've got left because the supermarket chains won't do business in most of the inner cities. Some guy who owns that little corner store, he's not coming back, folks, and he's not bringing the jobs back. This is from Newt Gingrich. He was on the Kelly File last night on Fox News Channel. And he believes that these riots that we're now seeing are really a serious threat to the security of the country's future. I want you to take a listen for a moment.
I think this is an American tragedy. 53 years after Martin Luther King's great I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial, 8 years after the election of an African-American president who's had 2 consecutive African-American attorney generals, race relations are decaying in this country. Part of the reason for that young woman's anger is way beyond violence. It's schools that don't work, neighborhoods with no jobs, random violence, a sense of being powerless even though there's an African-American president. There's a report today that over 3,000 people have been shot in Chicago this year. They don't get this kind of coverage, but over 3,000 people have been shot. Over 500 have been killed in Chicago. And yet, there's no national reaction. Obama doesn't notice it. Clinton doesn't notice it. And I think there are 2 different things here, and I don't know what will happen in the next 50 or so days. One is the country at large will not tolerate this kind of random violence. People will not tolerate looting. They won't tolerate closing I-85. They won't tolerate burning things. On the other hand, most Americans, I think, desperately would love to fix the challenge of the inner city, and they know it's not working.
Somebody said to me off air today, martial law may be next. Now, I don't know who would institute that, and the problem with that, when it's happened in other countries, is sometimes the people who do it, when they put things back together, they don't want to let go of the power. That's the threat to our way of life, our constitutional republic that we have when these things take place. By the way, I mentioned my old boss from Charlotte. He says that he lives there, and he says it's a powder keg. Best he can describe it as of this morning. So it may not be done. Usually these things will peter out in a few days after everybody gets their new sneakers and steals their few bales of toilet paper, and then they all go home, and that's the end of it. But it looks like this thing may continue on for a few more days. 9:55, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. When I moved to Idaho, my fiance at the time, I could tell as soon as I mentioned that I was moving here, she wasn't going to be coming. And she called me a couple of weeks after I got here, and she said to me, I just looked at the map. I mean, she said, for crying out loud, you're almost to California. So things ended up breaking off. I ended up getting in touch, though, with another old girlfriend, as it turned out, and had a very nice conversation with her going on for a few months. And then one day I said, have you ever thought about coming to Idaho? Why would anybody want to come to Idaho? And then somebody else I know, same thing, a woman I know from many, many years ago, said to me one day, just not long ago, she said, why would I want to come to Idaho? I don't know anybody there. And, my family's all here. But you know what? We don't have these problems in Idaho that they have in other parts of the country. And other people don't realize that. This is the blessing of living here, at least for now. I say for now. We don't have these issues that people have in other parts of the country. And you get up in the morning here, and about the worst thing that you can deal with is when you turn on the TV and see it happening somewhere else. How do you maintain it here? Well, you have to be forever vigilant, don't you? I mean, that's the key to all of this. You have to be sure. Tomorrow we're going to talk about that plan, that comprehensive plan for the city of Twin Falls. During the course of the program, we'll have a guest coming in from the city. But these are all related issues. And if you like your way of life right now, then how do you go about best? We've already got to deal with the methamphetamine and the heroin and other things that pass through here. But you know what? It's not crisis level. And in that part of it, you can still say, all right, we don't have to throw in the towel, not yet. So how do we make it better? Or how do we maintain it? Tomorrow, as I say, we'll have more details on that. Rush Limbaugh is going to be following news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Sean Hannity's program following the 1 o'clock news today. Glenn Beck following 4 o'clock news. Dave Ramsey tonight right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 53. I hope you stay dry today. It's not going to be easy. The newspaper said this morning, Times News said we only had 2/3 of an inch of rain all summer at the airport. I'm sure we've already reached that point today. Bill Colley with you for the time being, and we'll be going away for about 22 hours, but God willing, if the creek don't rise, they'll allow me to come back in here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock in the morning and do this all over again. Hope to see you then.